Morning, everybody, and welcome to the Florida Friendly Landscaping Professional Webinar. My name is Mark Celestin, and I am the training coordinator for the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. And we are thrilled to have every single one of you all join us today for our scheduled webinar on the topic of the UF IFAS H2O SAVE program, Optimizing Water with Dr. Nick Taylor. Before we get into everything, there's a question posted on your screen here. We would like you all to let us know where you're from, where you're joining us from, and also taking a stab at this question here that Dr. Nick Taylor prepared for us. I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items as well to ensure a smooth session. Microphones. Your microphones are muted to minimize disruption. So if you have a question, please feel free to type it into the Q&A section because the chat option will be removed once Dr. Nick Taylor starts speaking. The chat feature, the chat will remain closed during the presentation. If you have questions, please use the Q&A box. The webinar is approved for one continuing education unit or CEU for the following certification: the FFLCP, the FDAX LF, LCLM, LLO, CLO, and ONT. Department of Business and Professional Regulations, LA license, as well as the FNGLA and International Society of Arboriculture, ISA. If you'd like to receive a CEU certificate, there is a $15 administration fee. I will share the link in the chat box momentarily. To make payments if you haven't done so already. Please note, the CEU payments must be made by the end of today. We will submit CEUs to the licensing agencies on Friday or by Friday, this Friday, January 17th. This session is a part of our monthly webinar series held on the second Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. So please mark your calendars for our next scheduled webinar for February 11th. And the topic for that is going to be Florida-friendly seascapes, living shorelines for a sustainable and resilient coastal Florida with Dr. Vincent Encomio. Finally, as we wrap up today, a survey invitation will arise. Please take a moment to complete it because that survey will help us tailor our educational program moving forward. Thank you again for joining us, and we are going to pass the floor over to Tom to introduce Dr. Nick Taylor.
Mark, thank you so much. I am Tom Wickman. I'm the Assistant Director of the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, and so excited to be with you today as we kick off our webinar series for 2025. Seems shocking that we're in 2025 already. Just looking at the chat box, I haven't seen anybody attempt the question with what's on the screen. So while I'm introducing our speaker, take a stab at it. See what you can come up with. I know one respondent from Osceola said, no clue. I appreciate you're the only one that addressed it that I saw. But take a little stab at answering what was the water demand in Florida for 2023. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce our speaker today. It's Dr. Nick Taylor. He works with the Program for Resource Efficient Communities as an IFAS state specialized extension agent. His research interests include utility data analysis to identify effective water and energy conservation measures and evaluation of land development impacts. Dr. Taylor leads the H2OSAV Extension program, providing data analysis tools and data-driven insights that help regional utility providers, government agencies, and extension agents optimize water conservation efforts. Dr. Taylor received his master's and PhD degrees in the College of Design, Construction, and Planning at the University of Florida. Today, Dr. Taylor will be sharing his insights on optimizing water conservation through the H2OSAV program. Without any further delay, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Nick Taylor.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the opportunity to share my work with you today. Again, I work with the H2OSAV program that stands for Water Savings, Analytics, and Verification. We work with a number of folks around the state, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But first, I want to talk to you about the situation with water in Florida. So the question was, what was the water demand in Florida in 2023? Just to give you a broad sense of it, 6.8 billion gallons per day. It comes mostly from groundwater. We do use some surface water. There's also a little bit of desalinized seawater, but most of that is groundwater from our aquifer. Okay, so the direct related question was the population. You guys probably have a better sense of what the population was. In 2023, we're looking at 22 million, we're moving closer to 23 million now in Florida. And I know you've all heard it. How many people are moving to Florida every day? So if you look at the total change, the births and deaths, the main point is that we're at a little over 1,000 people per day. I've lived in Florida since about 2006, and I have always heard that number. That's always been the case, 1,000 new people a day moving to Florida. And that trend has not changed. So you all may be familiar with the Florida 2070 report. It was conducted by the 1,000 Friends of Florida. You have GeoPlan Center. We got to help with that a little bit with the Program for Resource Efficient Communities. And essentially what we're doing is looking at what we expect the landscape to be like in Florida going forward. So on the left-hand side, you see what it was like in 2010. The red areas are the developed areas. The green areas are the protected areas. And then you have the other lands that are kind of up for development, I guess. And on the right-hand side, you see what the expected trend would be in 2070. If we continue the way we're going, we're going to see much more developed state. And of course, that all leads back to our topic of the day, which is, and what you all do, is working with landscapes, because there's landscapes for all of those residential areas. Directly related is the Florida water situation. So again, left side is 2010 baseline. These are withdrawals of water. And then on the right, those imperiled waters just expanding. We all expect that. We know that that's the trend, more people using more water. So that demand that we talked about, 6.8 billion gallons per day, we're expecting that to rise. In 2040, we're going to be up a little above 7 billion. And where the rubber meets the road is where we now have water resource caution areas. This is where our demand is outstripping our actual supply. So we have the Central Florida Water Initiative area in the middle. We have Tampa Bay region, the North Regional Water Supply Plan. We have the South Florida, and historically we haven't seen really high water demand out in the Panhandle. We have less people. We have more water resources, but now even that's becoming a problem. Especially in the Panhandle from Destin over to Pensacola, we're seeing a lot more development. So we're going to get down to it, but really our landscaping choices are really driving a lot of this. So changing landscapes and changing waterscapes. We've had the population change over time. We've lost a lot of natural or semi-natural acres. We have agricultural lands that are lost to development. So those natural lands are going 50% urban, 50% ag, and then those agricultural lands get pushed into development. So it's a natural this natural progression of things. Believe it or not, these two are the same places. They're actually adjoining. So we have these are not two pictures pulled from different places. This actual line that you see in the middle, is just a break. It's a canal, and what's left of it is on the left side is undeveloped, and then the right-hand side is the development. And this is just an illustration of how that land changeover can occur and the differences between what it looks like before and after. So that left-hand side, that natural ground cover, we're only getting about 10% runoff. We're getting over half of that goes to shallow and deep infiltration, which gets back to that groundwater and our groundwater resources. But then in that urban center, we have up to 55% that's just runoff. And we get very little going back into the ground. So not only are we using a lot of groundwater, but we're not replenishing it in the ways that we did before. And then that runoff creates its own problems in terms of water quality. And that gets back to our waters not attaining standards. So it's kind of happening all around our state. We have this model of our water resources and the standards we want them to attain, and we're rapidly losing that. So now I want to talk about my program, H2OSAV. So these red places on the map, this is an expanding program. We've been going for about 5 years. The places in red are the places where we're currently working. So we worked with folks up in Duval, Nassau, St. Johns County, Alachua County, Marion, all through the Central Florida Water Initiative District in the middle, Tampa Bay Water, and down to Sarasota. We are continuing to expand, but that's where we're working now. We work with everything from cities and municipalities, their utility providers, work with home builders, extension agents, our DEP in the state of Florida, all of our water management districts, really anyone who's working with a water conservation program, we want to help them do a better job. Okay, context. Everybody has seen a pallet of water. This one has 1,296 bottles of water, which is roughly 171 gallons. Remember that number, 171 gallons. Okay, people ask the question, how much potable water do Florida homes use for landscape irrigation? When I did this part of the study, we were looking at all the homes that we have data for. This is a little over 930,000 homes across Florida. The indoor water use was about 126 gallons per day. The outdoor water use is about 94 gallons per day. It's a little more, 57% indoor, 43% outdoor. But that's across all homes. So now, if we look at new homes and the more recent trend, we're looking at 2015 forward. I'm looking at 38,000 homes, almost 39,000. We see the indoor use has gone down. Now we're looking at indoor use 118 gallons per day. A lot of that is because of WaterStar appliances and things, better fixtures indoor. But the outdoor has drastically gone up. And again, this is on average about 133 gallons per day outdoor. So we see that switch from using less outdoor to using more of our water outdoor. So these new homes, 45% indoor, 55% outdoor. We'll take that another step. These are folks using potable. Let's look at reclaimed. Okay, again, this is 27, almost 28,000 homes. The indoor, almost the same, which we would expect. Nothing should change indoor, but then that outdoor is drastically increased. 274 gallons per day outdoor. And in some cases, you could think maybe that reclaimed water doesn't, who cares if we're using that reclaimed water? We need to use it anyway. But if we want, what we really want to do is get that outdoor use down so that if we're going to supply irrigation landscapes, we can spread that water out and provide it to more people. So I found this was interesting. So in the blue columns, we have single meter people. They just have 1 meter. They have irrigation systems, but they only have 1 meter. The green columns are folks with 2 meters, but their outdoor meter is potable water. And then the purple is the folks who have a reclaimed meter outdoors. And on the y-axis is their average monthly water use. And so for Orange County utilities, you see the single meter folks using less, then dual potable, and then dual reclaimed using more. And so that trend holds across these several utilities. Folks with reclaimed use more. And so we look at sort of the other side of that. I wonder why they're using more. One indicator is this is what they pay for. So the cost in US dollars per month, we see the single meter folks paying the most, and then the dual potable, they pay less, and then the dual reclaimed even pay less. The reason that the dual potable folks generally pay less is because they don't have their wastewater fee on their outdoor water use. So they have an incentive to get a secondary meter that doesn't have those wastewater fees. But it becomes a perverse incentive, and they end up using more water on their landscape, even though they're paying less. So, okay. This is data just from City of Gainesville and Alachua County. And this is the percentage of single-family detached homes with permanent in-ground irrigation systems in Gainesville, Florida. The y-axis again is percentage of homes, and the x-axis is just, they're just grouped by the year they were built. So what you see is from 1920 up to about 1980, 85, we had very small portion of those new homes being built that have irrigation systems. And I will say that those old homes that have irrigation systems, those were retrofit because they didn't make them back then. But then in the mid 80s, it became a trend. It was actually a change in land development style, and more of the new homes got permanent in-ground irrigation systems. That has a lot to do with our planned neighborhood developments and things like that. But by the time you get to 2015, almost all of the new homes have permanent in-ground irrigation systems. Now, here's the trend of average daily water use. Same chart in terms of the x-axis, we have those year built, but then on the y-axis, we have the average daily water use. And you see from 1920 to 1985, they're hovering from about 125 gallons per day to maybe 160 gallons per day, but it stays pretty even. And then in those mid 80s and 90s, we start to see that increase. And if we overlay those, we can see it's a pretty clear trend of what's happening. The more people that have permanent in-ground irrigation systems, the more water we're using. That all makes sense, I think. There's a little, just some basic math. If you were to apply an inch of irrigation to 1,000 square feet, that would take 623 gallons. If you look across all the homes that we have data for, the average landscape area around the home is a little over 3,000 square feet. Now, IFAS recommends 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch each time you need to irrigate. So if you were to put 1/2 inch on that 3,000 square feet, you would use 991 gallons of water. That's if your irrigation system was 100% efficient. We know it's not. We know they're generally about 50% efficient. But you got that 991 gallons in a very ideal scenario. You would have to stand in the shower for over 8 hours to use that much water. So the reason this is important is just I try to focus people on the ability, the conservation potential of addressing landscape irrigation. It really is the most important topic, and I focus on it every day. So not only does that irrigation, it's the fastest way to use water, is to spray it out through an irrigation system. But we know that people don't do that evenly. This is a neighborhood, and we're just looking at water use, 150 gallons per day for the dark green areas, all the way up to 1,000 gallons a day or more for the dark orange or red ones. And this is a planned neighborhood development. These lots are very similar. The landscapes are very similar. You have some smaller lots, you have some bigger lots, but they fall within a kind of small range. But you notice that the water use is drastically different, even from neighbor to neighbor. So that's what we're really trying to address now, is how do we get down to address this variability? Okay, just to get down to streetscape on this, I'm going to show you 3 homes in a row, same side of the street, in the same neighborhood. We have 1. These are dual metered homes, by the way. So this is 207 gallons per day and almost 0 outdoor. They use a little bit, but it fluctuates from month to month, but it's very little. Okay, now we're shifting to the left, that grayish home there. We're going to get in front of that one. This one is 566 gallons per day total with 330 gallons going outdoor. And now again, we're going to shift to the left. We have this home. It looks like a little bit bigger landscape, although that just might be the way the house is set and the way the photo is taken. We're up to 1,000 gallons per day in that landscape with 783 gallons per day going outdoor. They even have a lot of planted beds here. So that's just sort of what we see on a regular basis, is that you have these landscapes. They don't look all the same, but they're using drastically different amounts of water. When we do irrigation audits and evaluations, these are 6 different irrigation evaluation programs, 6 different utility territories, and just the water savings from them. So on the y-axis, we have the savings in gallons per day, and on the x-axis, we have how much water they were using before. So we talk about this in terms of conservation potential. And so what we see is there's a cluster kind of on the right where these folks are using more water to start with, and they therefore have higher conservation potential. So when you go out and do the work in that landscape, you have higher water savings. And I would encourage each of you to think about it. If you're doing this type of work, really consider how much water they're using before and whether that's really a good target and a use of your time. So remember that 171 gallons. This is average daily water use, indoor water use for dual metered homes. It hovers around 150 gallons per day. Before we were talking about 126, 118. That's directly indoor. This is just like their primary meter. So some of this goes for pools, some of it goes for car washing, all their indoor stuff. This is just anything but irrigation, around 150 gallons per day. That's pretty consistent over time. It's consistent across the utility territories that we work with. It holds pretty strong. So those single metered homes with irrigation systems, you would think that if someone was irrigating, that in an ideal scenario, the more land that they were irrigating, the more water they would use. That turns out not to bear out in the actual data that we look at. And we're going to talk about why in a moment. So here on the y-axis, we have the gallons per day used per household, and then we have their irrigable area, their landscaped area in their yard. And basically, you have the dots, that's just scatter plot of all the different homes, and then you have the black line, which is the trend. And you don't see, there's no trend related to increasing irrigable area and increasing water use. It's just kind of all over the board. Back to that variability issue we talked about earlier. So then I decided to drill down a little bit more, and okay, these are single metered homes, and maybe this is not showing a trend because it's indoor water use. But now let's take a step down and let's look at the dual metered homes. This is just the outdoor water use that we know is for the irrigation system only. And again, we have the gallons per day per household just on their outdoor meter. That's on the y-axis, and we're looking at that increased irrigable area in square feet. And you see a little bit of a trend, but not a strong trend like we would expect. We would really expect a strong linear trend. Just the more square feet means more water. That's it. So why isn't that happening? Why is it that we're looking at this landscape, we're seeing bigger landscape, but not necessarily more water use, smaller landscape, not necessarily less water use? This really comes down to behavior, irrigation system settings, irrigation system maintenance, and all of those other soft factors rather than just the landscape area itself. We can have folks with very large landscapes with very low water use. We have people with very small landscapes, very high water use. It's all over the board. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of getting those irrigation systems set properly, getting all of those stopping and repairing leaks and all of those things within those irrigation systems. So this is when we get to kind of the call to action and what can you all do as landscape professionals to reverse that trend of higher and higher water use that we're seeing. We got a few things. We have a few things that we're working on. One is limit or remove irrigation. This is my daughter. She's standing on a field of unirrigated bahia in South Florida. Very fine looking lawn. But yes, it's about picking that right plant for the right place. In this case, it happens to be a very lovely bahia. This is another yard that I just happened to pass in Gainesville. This is in the winter. They don't irrigate this, but they keep it very well manicured. And okay, the grass is brown because it's winter, but it greens up very nicely in the summer. So just going with that trend and allowing that to happen. But yeah, just a good example of an unirrigated landscape. So that's step number one, is getting rid of this complicated irrigation system when you can, when that's a possibility. Then there's sort of landscape design to minimize those areas that really have to have landscape irrigation. I also like the concept of landscapes that grow out of needing irrigation. What we see a lot, I'm sure you all see it all over, is 20-year-old bushes that are still being irrigated. And you see those a lot at I don't know, the Publix down the road and shopping centers, and even on University of Florida campus. You have really old bushes that definitely don't need that irrigation anymore, and they're just being constantly irrigated. So this is just some different landscapes I think this was in the Villages, where they redid a lot of the landscapes just to go to kind of some different things, required less maintenance overall. So then, in order to have those landscapes that require less water, need less water, we can do some soil amendments. And this is an image of a brand new neighborhood development. This is how we got into this situation. They've gone in, they've cleared all of the trees out, or maybe even this was an agricultural field, a pasture or something, and they've just stripped off all the topsoil, clean, blank slate. It gets compacted by trucks and different things rolling over it. They put the houses down, and then they just roll out the turf. But in order to keep that turf alive, you have to have a life support system. Essentially, you have to have that irrigation system. You have to fertilize, you have to do all those things, because we haven't given it any good soil that it can live on. So we've been talking a lot about soil amendments, and we have some of our colleagues here working on that, working on what's the right amount of compost amendments. How often should that be applied? What are the risks of nutrient leaching and all of these different things? And this is the image of just a new landscape where that a compost medium is being tilled in to the soil. And then they'll go back and they'll put their landscape on top of that and create a much better growing environment. So we don't need all this extra, the water, the fertilizer, we don't need as much. And we actually have a document about that that's available from IFAS that gives guidance on amending urban soils. And that's by Dr. Evan Bean, very good material there. And then sort of from my group, what are we doing about it? What are we doing to help out with this? We're trying to do some research on sort of what the conservation potential is and how we can get to it. So if we go out, I just want to know, like, well, if we don't step the irrigation system all the way down, what if we just reduce it by 1 cycle per week? Now, remember earlier we talked about 991 gallons per irrigation cycle. And if you watered twice a week, you would be about 8,000 gallons per month. And then your estimated indoor, that 150 gallons per day, would get you at about 4,500. That means estimated 12,491 gallons. So that would be if you irrigated twice a week and you used your indoor. And so I just looked in Orange and Osceola County, who's using more than that? And I found 40,000 homes that are using more water than that. That means they could probably step back by 1 irrigation cycle per week. So if we did that, we would end up saving 40 million gallons per week, or 5.6 million gallons per day. Now, in terms of a conservation program, you're not going to see anything that comes anywhere close. To give you a scale, Gainesville, their consumptive use permits around 23 million gallons per day. this is a sizable chunk of that. For Orange and Osceola County, they're probably looking at about 120 million gallons per day in their consumptive use permit. This is a serious decrease. And I know it's hard to do this in 40,000 homes because you have to get to all those homes, but it's a very simple change from at each home to do it. And this is one of those situations where their landscape wouldn't be suffering. We would just be saving water, kind of stopping the unnecessary use. I'm also looking, I know if you're a landscape professional, you are seeing irrigation design standards popping up left and right. You're seeing Florida Water Star, seeing a lot of different things. And so what I want to know is what's working. And so we're looking at irrigation design standards. Here's one in Alachua County. They got irrigation system design and installation in Osceola County. And so what we want to know, I want to look at irrigation restrictions and budgets. I want to look at irrigation design, which would be like Florida Water Star, Florida friendly landscaping. I want to look at rainfall shutoff, smart controllers versus the typical rain shutoff device. We want to look at water storage, reuse, and even low impact development. And our goal is to find out what's working. Is it working for everybody across the board? What's the implementation that's helping it work? What's the enforcement? What's the tracking, the engagement? And how do we iterate that process to make it better? And that's really where the focus of my program comes out and what we try to share with all of our partners and local governments. So again, my goal as an IFAS Extension agent is to protect our water resources in the state. And for me, that goes back to the streams and rivers, like what you see in the background behind me. I was just out at H2OSAV the other day. These are two manatees that were right there on the river with me in the early morning. And I would like to believe that we can protect the water they need while having the types of landscapes that we want. But that's up to professionals like you all, and at University of Florida IFAS Extension, we're going to try to give you the best information that we can. I will open it up now for questions. I'm usually more of a dialogue presenter. I like where we have more of a discussion. So if you have questions, let us know, and I'm glad to address those.
Hey, Nick, that's really fascinating stuff. It's so interesting to see the difference from one neighbor to the next as to how much water they're using. It's really crazy how much water we sometimes waste. And so, we all have to be part of the solution. And so I appreciate you presenting this information, and it really is it's a resource that we all depend upon, and I think we're all responsible for. So let me ask one of the questions that came in to the Q&A box. They wanted to know the average outdoor water use, you say, is 274 gallons per day. How can that be allowed when they're only able to water twice a week?
Longer irrigation times. Okay. I try to put this in gallons per day because that helps us understand the quantities. When we start to talk about 7, 8, 10,000 gallons per month, I start to lose my ability to understand how much water that is. And so I break it down into average gallons per day. Yeah. They don't use it. It's not like they're using 274 gallons every day. That's just like when we divide it by the number of days in the month, this is the average. Their irrigation cycles, again, are going to be that minimal one was 991 gallons. These folks may be using 2,000 or 3,000 gallons per irrigation cycle or more. And so I hope that clarifies, not actually gallons every day, just an average.
Just an average. That makes perfect sense. And one of the things we try and recommend with the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program is for people to take their system off of running automatically. Mm-hmm. And run it manually, and actually go out and look at their landscape and let it tell you, based upon what the plants are doing and showing, when to water, and when those plants do show signs of water stress, then it may be time to pop up the irrigation. And that unfortunately the automated systems have, people are afraid to touch them. They don't know how to run them. And so that's a real problem. People really need to get to know how to use and manage their irrigation systems.
Yeah, I want to add one thing. Let's see, I want to get back to that one slide with the variability on it. I don't know where that's at, but I just like that picture. The one thing that we find, and I'm sure that you all see it, is that much like a speed limit on a road, most people take that as the suggested speed that you should go. And what the sign is actually telling you is that is the maximum speed you're allowed to go. So when we think about that in terms of irrigation, we are allowed to water up to maybe 2 times per week. That does not mean that you should water 2 times every week.
Right.
That means the absolute maximum that you're allowed. And so if we can change that mindset to only provide the plants the water that they need, then that will be a huge shift for us. And I think that will be very helpful. There was a document that was done a few years back by Dr. Michael Dukes. He's our center director here. And I want to say that it was the net irrigation requirement. And for Gainesville, Alachua County, the net irrigation requirement for the whole year was about 18 or 19 inches. And if you water a half an inch twice a week for 52 weeks, you're going to far surpass that. And so you're going to be giving plants way more water than they need. And so I wish we had some good ways of sharing that with homeowners and getting them off of that expectation of twice a week.
Not to mention the fact that, Nick, we get 50 plus inches of rainfall, per year, on top of that irrigation. And so, it's people really need to monitor the weather. And that's where some of these smart irrigation systems, the ET controllers and soil moisture sensors can really help to automate things a little bit and maybe reduce that a little bit. One of the comments in the Q&A box was from Boca Raton, and they wish that there was more education because they think that the majority of people probably don't even realize that there are limits to how often that they can irrigate, and that it changes throughout the year.
Yep, that's definitely something. Another colleague here, we are doing a lot of work on this to try to share the best information. Another colleague here, Laura Warner, does social science research, and that's definitely something she found is that people just don't know about their irrigation restrictions. They don't fully understand them. When they do understand them, they don't necessarily know how to implement them. That's back to what you were saying, Tom, about people not knowing how to really work with those timers. They're very complex. But the system, the interesting part is we've given these homeowners very complex irrigation systems. And I always like to say there's no faster way to pour water on the ground. We have found the fastest way to pour the water on the ground. And so with these complicated systems, different heads, different pressures, different zones, like this is micro irrigation, and this is spray heads. And then you have this complex clock with different settings and all these things. They really don't want to touch it because they're afraid of breaking it. And it just, when we get used to it and we know how to work those things, sometimes we can take it for granted that other folks will know how to do that too. And I don't feel like that's the case.
Definitely. And one of the people in the Q&A box just pointed out that, during the winter, especially in North Florida, but going into Central Florida and even to a point down in South Florida, the water demand during the wintertime, during the cooler months of the year, is certainly much less than that during the growing season. And so, I think University of Florida has done numerous studies, and they're showing that, your landscape needs much less water in the wintertime, maybe, as little as once every 2 weeks or even less, depending upon rainfall. So, really need to be monitoring. I love, I'm a weather watcher, I'm a weather guy, so I love to have a rain gauge so I know how much rain I got at my home. So that helps me determine whether I need to water or not. And you know, that's to me a very helpful tool, and I think everybody should be monitoring what's going on in their landscape, whether it's automated or not. They need to know what's going on, and a lot of times just looking at the plants can help. I did want to address too some of the other questions coming in. This session, this webinar is recorded. It will be archived in one to 2 weeks. It'll be up on the Florida Friendly Landscaping website. And so you'll be able to rewatch and you know, take a look at some of those. There was a lot of great stats that Dr. Taylor put in there. We want to, you know, want people to have access to that. So know that this presentation will be there so that you can always go back and check things out. So let's see what else. Question is, will the presentation be available to download and share? It'll be available to view from that FFL website, and that link is Mark did put that link in the chat early on, so know that will be available as well. But it's right on the Florida Friendly Landscaping website under educational resources. So
one other thing, Tom, that I'll offer to do is I'll just add a resources page to the end of the presentation
okay.
with links to a lot of this material. This is all based on IFAS research that's available. It's available in a number of different places. A lot of it's from the EDIS website, Electronic Document Information System. But I'll make that resource page so it's easier to get to some of these things.
That's fantastic. That'll make things much easier for folks. They won't have to look around for it. It'll all be in one central location and all be related to this topic. Dr. Taylor, thank you so much. I do want to thank all of our audience for joining us too. A reminder, February 11th, we have the Florida Friendly Seascapes Living Shorelines for a Sustainable and Resilient Coastal Florida, and that's at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on February 11th. A reminder, please make sure you fill out the survey. That does help us come up with topics that are relevant to you and hopefully that will help you learn. And we certainly appreciate you joining us each and every month for this professional webinar series. Dr. Taylor, thank you. Thank you for providing this information. Thanks for the resources that you're going to provide and pull together as well.
Yep. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate being able to share my work with you all. And thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
All right, everybody, have a great day.
All right, take care.